What's happening, folks? My name's Martin.
And I'm Shonagh.
And we are just two movie lovers searching for Deckard's unicorn.
That mythical movie experience that feels like a dream or a nightmare. In each episode, we'll be sharing our thoughts on mulling over movies, poking fun at plot holes, and giggling at goofs.
We'll also take the occasional trip down the rabbit hole into prominent themes, genres, actors, or background stories from films we love.
And some we, well, didn't. So, if you enjoy listening to unfiltered stream of consciousness banter about film and television, you can subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to them.
You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on Twitter at Deckard's Unicorn. How's it going, folks? So today we are going to be talking about Jurassic Park.
An adventure 65 million years in the making.
So yeah, it's quite an undertaking for our very first podcast. So much to talk about here. So we're going to break it down into different sections. And the first section we're going to be looking at today is our recollections and general impressions of the movie. So Shonagh, when was the first time you seen Jurassic Park?
Okay, so in the UK, Jurassic Park was released in the summer of 1993. So this was back in the days where the UK got films after America. So we got to see the hype coming in from the US box office. And we always had that really tense wait for films to come over here if we didn't manage to obtain them on VHS legally. In July 1993, that was the summer of my 8th birthday. And I remember going to see this film with my family. There was so much hype about this film. I think this was like, I was too young for the original Star Wars hype. So for me, this was like the Star Wars of my generation. There was so much. There was so many toys. There was so much. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had like a $65 million budget for advertising. So this was a big deal to us. You know, we spoke about it in school. We were all really excited. And I think this was probably the first scary film that I saw as a child. Yeah. Okay, it's not so much scary now, but to me at that time, dinosaurs were scary. Yeah, absolutely.
As a kid, this would have been quite scary, I think. I mean, there's actually so many moments in it where you're kind of thinking, how did they get that past the censors? You know, where you've got a moment where a guy gets essentially bitten in half while sitting on the toilet, even though he's not actually going to the toilet. He's wearing shorts. I didn't really see that at the first time. I always thought he was sitting on the toilet, but he's not really. Me too. But yeah, there's that, and there's also a severed arm at one point.
Yeah.
Where Laura Dern is sort of backing up against a wall and Samuel Jackson's arm
yeah,
appears.
So this was like a PG, so parental guidance in the UK, was that right? So
yeah, it's funny because I think the same thing happened in, mentioned Star Wars earlier, but the same thing happened in Star Wars, where in A New Hope you've actually got the severed arm in the cantina, you know, where Obi-Wan Kenobi cuts off that beast's arm.
Oh, yeah.
And it's lying on the floor in a wee sort of pool of blood. So I don't know what Lucas and Spielberg have got up their sleeve, but they seem to be able to get these things past the censors no problem. I think it's maybe because you're not actually seeing the actual cutting.
Yeah. And
it's just kind of the after effect. But yeah, I mean, personally, I was 18. I'm showing my age here, but I was 18 when this one came out, and I don't actually remember where I seen it. I remember seeing it in a cinema. I know that much. But I don't even remember where. It was most likely in Glasgow or possibly even Saltcoats. There was a cinema down there called the La Scala. So it might have been in Saltcoats or Glasgow. I'm not 100% sure. But I think this film holds up really well. Like, it really, really does. The effects still look great. We looked at the 4K version recently, the upscaled version, and a lot of the backgrounds. And you can see when the effects are not as good as they used to be, clearly, but they still look great for the time. But the actual 4K upscale made it look a little bit worse, actually. So yeah. We watched it on Blu-ray last night and it still looks fantastic on that. Williams' score is on point. There's a time period for John Williams, I think. Maybe his time has passed and you've now got more like Hans Zimmer and Ludwig Göransson and various others, but there was just a time when every sort of big budget blockbuster needed a Williams score, and pretty much all of them got one. And he's just created so many iconic scores. It's a fantastic body of work. But yeah, for me, it holds up really well and really enjoyed it this time round. It's really well directed. I can say it's directed by Steven Spielberg, and it was shot by Dean Cundey, who's one of my favourite DOPs. Shot The Thing, Halloween 3, Roadhouse, Apollo 13, amongst others. So
classics.
Yeah, that's a hell of a filmography that guy's got as well. The first sighting is still amazing when you see it, when Sam Neill sort of takes off his glasses. Love the acting there, but he can barely get his glasses off his face, like quick enough to sort of see what's going on.
Yeah.
He's looking up at, is it a brontosaurus he's looking at?
I think that's one of those ones that we think is a brontosaurus, but actually, or it is a brontosaurus, but we all thought it was a diplodocus.
A diplodocus.
Diplodocus. Yeah, that's a totally classic scene though, isn't it? Because there's Ellie, Dr. Sattler, she's examining a leaf. She's a botanist, paleobotanist, so she's examining this leaf, talking about how exciting it is because this plant should have been extinct. And there's that iconic moment where Sam Neill grabs her gently and lovingly by the head and just turns it towards, you can't see it at this moment, and then you see what to me was just an awesome reaction as she stands up totally dumbfounded at what she's looking at, and then the camera pans round and you get to see them for the first time, and it is bitchin'.
Yeah, I mean, Spielberg did a kind of a similar thing to what he did in Jaws. Although he does show some dinosaurs, like everyone remembers the kind of the monster of the film, which is essentially the T-Rex. And I like the way Spielberg kind of keeps that till about halfway through the movie until you actually get to see it. But he puts all these other kind of harmless sort of dinosaurs early on. You know, you've got the Triceratops. What I loved as well about it is that this is a really great mix of CGI and practical, and also sets and locations. I don't know if this was one of the last great epic movies that kind of used all of those things together. I mean, I know they still get used in combination quite a bit these days, and maybe practical and things like that are coming back. If you look at things like Nolan, he's trying to do everything in camera, and he's getting people to do the actual stunts as opposed to CGI in it. But this was an amazing mix of all those elements. So many artists and so many techniques all just coming together. And it really does come together seamlessly. Like I said, you can see that it's not the top end quality anymore. For what it was at the time, you really did believe that there was dinosaurs. I suppose it was kind of like when people seen Superman fly for the first time with Christopher Reeve. You know, the tagline was, you'll believe a man can fly. And I think that, you actually believed that dinosaurs were walking the earth when you seen this, because there was nothing else even close to it. Previously, all we had to go on was things like the Godzilla movies, which are basically guys in suits, you know, or we had like the stop motion stuff, the kind of Ray Harryhausen style dinosaurs and King Kong and various things like that. So what struck me this time through as well was the pacing of it. Every act has got like 3 or 4 memorable sequences, but it really keeps you on the edge of the seat all the way. You know, there's no fat in this movie. There's not a point where it sort of dips and you feel like it's gone a bit dull. He's really good at sort of keeping you on the edge of your seat. And even when you're not seeing the actual beasts themselves, he's very clever with the environment and various other objects to make them seem scary as well. Because I think you've got like the sequence with the kids on the fence. You know, so even though there's danger, the fence is the actual danger. So it's quite a clever way of building tension and using that like a 5-minute sequence. And you've got the sequence in the tree where, you know, they look safe, and then all of a sudden it's like the car is chasing them down the tree as they're kind of coming to the ground. So that's what it's like. You know, you see the car's always got a face. You've got the grille, makes it look like teeth, and you've got the lights that make it look like eyes. So yeah, that's really clever filmmaking, where you don't have to show the monsters and continually have the same things on screen. You just switch it up a little bit. Just keep the intensity there, but
Absolutely. Yeah, but these characters really don't catch a break throughout this film, do they? It's just...
And the best blockbusters are the same. It's just constant obstacle, and then you feel like it's a roller coaster until the very end, you know. But again, the important point is not feeling bored. So even having watched this film a good few times, watching it again didn't feel like it was dull or boring.
No, not at all. I think I could watch this film forever. It's such a classic. The score that you mentioned previously is fantastic. Every time I hear it, you feel your heart soar. It's fantastic.
Okay, so the next thing we're going to be looking at is any sort of problems or goofs or funnies that we came across in the film. So Jurassic Park does have quite a few goofs and funnies.
What do you mean it's perfect?
I think it's definitely up there as a kind of almost perfect blockbuster.
Yeah.
If you're not looking for the top level acting, the top level this and that, you know, as a spectacle and as a blockbuster, it's definitely going to be remembered as one of the top films ever made. And obviously the box office sort of plays that out as well. But yeah, problems, goofs and funnies is a wee section we're going to be looking through today. So my first one I've got on my list was Dickie Attenborough's accent. So I think Dickie Attenborough's great in this, and we'll get to it later about best and worst performances and so on. But I think he's brilliant in it. But he's got a really good Scottish accent to begin with. You know, like he's rolling his R's. It sounds really nice.
And he says Costa Rica, not Costa Rica, which is how he would say it.
That's true.
It does. It sounds really authentic at first.
Yeah. But at first, exactly, then it starts to slip. So the longer the film goes on, he just ends up sounding like Richard Attenborough, Englishman again, which is fine. You know, again, the delivery's still there. It's on point. He's still giving everything he's got. But his accent is just ever so slightly slipped. And I think it's because his Scottish accent was not too far away from an English accent. It's just like certain things. And maybe when they're doing the shots, the directors are maybe not as familiar with a Scottish accent, so they don't really notice the difference maybe. So it's not like, oh, you know, Dickie, you've slipped. Can you can you do that again with more of a Scottish accent?
I could live with him being a Scotsman living abroad.
Living abroad. Yeah.
But apart from that, his performance is solid.
Yeah, his performance is great.
Okay, so problems. Labs in films are a constant source of horror to me.
Okay, so just a little bit of background. Shonagh is a scientist and works inside labs every day. So yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those ones I guess that I've got heightened awareness of. But whenever I see a lab or any kind of science going on, sometimes I think, could you just maybe have just got someone to advise on just some little points? Now I know directors are always going to make decisions on the aesthetics as well, how things come across, and they're not thinking about a scientist as being their demographic, but it's those types of things that really take you out of something when you're distracted by something that would horrify you if you saw it in a lab situation. Unlabeled beakers, number one. Number two, so if the pandemic, which has been awful, but there have been some positives that have come out of it. One of those is the ability to be able to say the acronym PPE.
And this podcast.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, this was the best. But also, now that I can say PPE, and people will know what I'm talking about. So what PPE are the scientists wearing in this lab here?
Yeah,
We've got some, what looks like maybe anti-static or clean room suits going on, but they've got uncovered faces. They've got no safety glasses.
Well, that was one of the funny things, because they just jump off the sort of the ride, and they just walk right into the lab and start sort of touching things, and there's nobody sort of saying...
Get the fuck out of my lab. If you've not read a COSH assessment and signed a risk assessment, you're not wearing safety glasses. Get your shit and take it the fuck out of my lab. That's what I would say.
I think another sort of thing that leads on from that is that the technology does look a little bit dated now. Obviously, again, cutting edge at the time. But I was just laughing at how the kids would be so upset with the tech. Like, everything's just so big and bulky. Yeah. And they get so excited about this sort of, oh my God, it's a touchscreen in the car. You know, like kids,
it's an interactive CD-ROM.
Kids would be so bored. Like, is that all it does? You just touch the screen and that's it?
Yeah, but then when I heard her say it was an interactive CD-ROM, I was like, oh my God.
So other little things problem-wise, we've got Samuel Jackson is basically like chain smoking his way through the entire film. I think smoking's making a bit more of a comeback now, but
it's been a stressful time, Martin.
I've seen a few things, but but yeah, like that's quite uncommon now, and I don't know if it would fly so much
that
maybe
really
these
struck
days.
me as like that really stood out to me, and I don't think I would have noticed that.
I mean, he's a great character in it, and it's a classic trope, isn't it? You know, the scientist that works all night over his desk, and he's basically, you know, he's got his coffee and he's got his cigarettes, and that's what's kind of keeping him going.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Like he would really, realistically, it would be highly caffeinated.
Yeah.
Sure about that.
I also love the Deep South gentleman, I think is the accent, who's doing the voiceover for the DNA.
We got you some dino DNA. I'm so sorry if I've just offended anyone with that accent. That was not my intention. I did though really like that they used that ride as a way of introducing the audience to the science, pseudoscience, behind the concept of how this park came to be, and I thought that was a really nice tool for doing that with.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, like, could you clone a dinosaur from DNA that you found in a mosquito?
And use frog DNA to back up.
So my biggest problem with this, and I do love it, and I am always willing to suspend my disbelief for films, particularly such a classic as this. DNA, according to an article from Nature, has a half-life of 521 years. Okay, so that means it takes 521 years for it to decompose into half of what it was before. Okay, so the nucleotides, so that's when you see projected onto a dinosaur later in the film, the ATGC. So those are the little building blocks of life. Okay, so it's the how those are put together, the order in which they are put together, that defines what you're going to be. Okay, so in 525 years, half of that order is going to be gone. And then in another 525 years, another half of that is going to be gone, which means that if you stored a dinosaur bone at -5 degrees, every single bond would be gone after 6.8 million years. Okay, so I think in order to make this film, we're a little bit late, maybe like 60 million years late.
Do you know what that sound was? That was the sound of things going well over my head. Okay, so yeah, so
So I'm going to call bullshit on being able to extract DNA from a mosquito.
I think what we're saying is the science is not particularly solid.
But I think they did a good job of making it something that you could, get away with in a film.
Yeah, I agree.
And I did like the fact that they used these things and they actually spoke about them. They didn't just kind of bullshit the audience and say, we made dinosaurs. They tried to explain it. And I really like it when filmmakers and people who produce content bring scientific terms and scientific knowledge into public consciousness. I think that's really helpful, and it's great for science and humanity.
Well, that was a lot more information than I thought I was going to get on that particular.
You're welcome.
So another sort of wee niggle I had was that Dennis, when he was telling him he was just going out for a minute to go to the snack machine, and you've got Wayne Knight there, and he just looks like a kid who's just done something terribly wrong. It's the most obvious moment of I've done something terrible, or I'm about to do something terrible, and I hope you don't find out about it. But
I'm going for a Snickers.
But I'm going for a Snickers. So yeah, I think if they hadn't noticed at this point, like, wait a minute, you're not going anywhere, son.
Yeah.
Get back here. What are you up to?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Samuel L. Jackson would have been like, no. But I think for the kids watching, that was maybe pitched at an okay level.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those kind of cookie cutter things where it's all very obvious, and yeah, he's clearly not like a mastermind criminal.
Yeah, so, I think that's maybe what that also hints at, is showing that he's maybe not the most competent.
But the thing is, he's also one of those characters that he does see himself as superior. Mm-hmm. That's his attitude. Like, he's more intelligent, he's smarter, he's got more to offer. That's kind of where his gripe with the money comes from. He believes, and they even say that in the film, that he's very important to what they're doing there, and they can't do it without him. So I think he knows that. He knows he's intelligent. He knows he's got that kind of hold over them, and he's clearly squeezing Dickie Attenborough for some cash, John Hammond for some cash, which he's not getting. Another moment in that was actually Samuel Jackson's socks. We see he's wearing these kind of like
quality
pink efforts, which are absolutely fantastic.
That was a Jon Snow moment, and for anyone listening outside of the UK, I mean Jon Snow, the newscaster. Not.
I think also in this film we've got quite a few moments of stunt doubles where they clearly are not the actor. I think again nowadays, I think that's using CGI and various other techniques can sort of hide the actors a bit better. And I think also there's a lot of actors who like to do their own stunts. It's just a wee bit noticeable in this one, like with Laura Dern and another couple of shots. There's a couple of terrible wigs happening. And at points, like you see when they're climbing down the fence, you can see it's clearly not a kid on his back. It just looks like an adult on his back. But yeah, they're just kind of minor gripe in the grand scheme of things. Not too bad. Actually, talking about the fence, we had the where Sam Neill says to the kid just to jump. He's like, okay, just jump. And then you look at the shot from above, looking down, and Sam Neill's standing about 50 feet away. The kid's about 100 feet up. Well, maybe he's about 20 feet up. And Sam Neill's about that distance at least away from it. So it's like, what are you
Go
asking
on,
this
Timmy.
kid to do? What are you asking this kid to do here?
Also, how do we feel about the fact that Tim, I always want to call him Timmy. How do we feel about the fact that he survives a massive electric shock?
Yeah, I had an issue with that. I actually thought, like, I think he would probably have died from that, especially a kid. But I thought it would have been better, in my humble opinion, if he'd maybe fallen into a pit of water, for example. You know, like he'd just fallen off the fence. Like the electrified fence is there, but he jumps early to try and get off it, you know, but ends up like jumping the wrong way or something and lands in a pit of water, and then perhaps is like brought back by.
Oh, has to get CPR after near drowning rather than.
Yeah.
Do we give CPR to someone who's electrocuted?
Well, I don't know.
I've let my first aid certificate expire, so I'm not
anyway,
qualified.
Yeah, the vast majority of these things are just they're minor gripes and things that we find a wee bit funny. But...
Yeah, and I mean we couldn't have poor Timmy catapulted to his death in a major blockbuster aimed at children. That would kind of put a downer on things.
Okay, so the next section we're going to talk about is any sort of themes and messages that sort of jumped out from the film. I think for me anyway, first one is there's corporate greed is clearly like a huge message in there. You've got this sort of sleazy lawyer character in there who's basically all in for the cash. It doesn't really matter how things turn out. But yeah, the corporate greed angle and obviously the subversion of nature's laws for profit, that kind of thing. I think that John Hammond in it actually genuinely cares. And I think I made the point, we were talking about this last night, that he's almost like a kind of benevolent god messing with nature, you know, because he's all dressed in white, he's got the white beard, he's kind of got this kind of image of the Christian god. And he's doing the right thing for his people, you know, and he wants everyone to see it and he wants everyone to be able to experience this thing. But
yeah, like when they're talking about, they could charge whatever they wanted for the entry, he makes a point of saying this park should be for everyone. So he actually already funds Alan and Ellie's research, and you know, he's offering them more money for that if they do endorse the park, which by the way is a massive conflict of interest, just saying.
Absolutely.
However, you do get the feeling that he is a philanthropist, he is doing things for the benefit of mankind, and he, you know, what he's doing might be morally questionable, but he's doing it from, you know, a place of good intentions. So it does introduce that kind of dichotomy. Yeah,
but ultimately, as we see, just as in Westworld, another Michael Crichton book that was turned into a film, some things cannot be tamed in that way. They cannot be recreated. And yeah, obviously, nature turns on them, finds a way, and the dinosaurs have their way, so to speak. Ignorance and ego sort of blinding Dickie a little bit there, until the very end where he finally comes to realise, like, yeah, this is a terrible idea. Let's not bother with this. Okay, the next section we're going to look at is our memorable moments. So, what's your most memorable moment from Jurassic Park? Just one, mind you.
Oh, there's so many. It sounds silly if I was to condense it down to the one moment that springs to mind when I think of Jurassic Park. It's that iconic scene, and they're all iconic scenes, where they're in the cars and they're going in for the safari, if you like, for the first time, and they approach those giant doors.
The King Kong doors.
The King Kong doors with a fire and emblazoned with Jurassic Park. And that's just such a classic. Like, it kind of captured the excitement that we felt about this film as well.
It is a great moment.
But there's no dinosaurs in it, so that feels like a bit of a weak choice.
Well, no, I mean, it's whatever sort of captured your imagination at the time, and I think that you've said that did. So for me, it's the sequence with the cup in the water. I mean, it's iconic. It's been used so many times since. But then that whole section with the water, the T-Rex approaches, and then you actually see the T-Rex finally for the first time. Mm-hmm. Like, it just never gets old. And again, the effects in that section are amazing. Because in dark and there's rain, it's a wee bit easier to sort of hide the fact that it's CGI. It blends a lot better, so it does feel very realistic at that point. It looks absolutely fantastic.
It was also a great opportunity to bring in those night vision goggles, which were available from Argos, on the top of every child's Christmas list.
Yeah, and that's another thing, actually, going back a step, is to sort of goofs and funnies, is the fact that there's so much Jurassic Park merch all over the park. You know, it's like everywhere you go, someone's got a cup or a scarf or a t-shirt.
Or a raincoat, Jurassic Park raincoat. That's awesome. I do want one of them.
And those goggles actually look like young Anakin Skywalker's goggles.
They do, don't they?
Pod race, didn't they? So maybe a wee bit of carryover there. Do you have any favourite quotes? My personal favourite quote is Samuel Jackson's "Hold on to your butts."
I didn't realise as well how many times he says this quite a few times in the film.
That's why it's my
doesn't he?
favourite, because he says it about 18 times.
It's so good. My personal favourite is clever girl. Just that moment when Muldoon realises that he's been tracked.
Yep.
And he's for it.
I like how actually in the beginning of the film you see that moment between them where he's trying to get the velociraptor into the pen, and he looks at her and he's saying, shoot her. And she looks at him and he looks back at her. It's like they've already established that connection that yep, they're gonna go at it at some point. It's very subtle. But that's another thing about that particular character was the fact that I remember when I first watching it thinking that I'm supposed to hate this guy.
Yeah.
Like, the dinosaurs got him, yeah. But it turns out it was actually like quite a heroic character. You know, on a number of occasions he's basically trying to protect people.
Absolutely.
And he actually does his best to not shoot them at the beginning, but obviously that man is dying. He's been eaten in half. And he's trying to save his life, so it's like a case of last resort, and you have to kill them.
Yeah.
And he's the guy who's constantly telling him throughout the film, you know, to just... we shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah,
you know?
he respects the power of these animals, and that probably comes from his background. I think I got the impression that he was like a game warden in
exactly. I think so. Yeah.
in Africa, and I don't know if that played into why I got the impression when I was young that I didn't like him.
Yeah, maybe there's a
kind of colonial
Yeah,
Englishman in...
He's definitely got the kind of Great White Hunter vibe.
Yeah, exactly. And though, you know, he's rocking those shorts and high socks, like...
Again, another interesting point about that is the fact that in a lot of Spielberg movies, you've usually got the kind of wizened person who's telling them, like, this is a terrible idea, you don't know what you're dealing with, I have the experience. You know, you think, like, Robert Shaw, for example, in Jaws. He's kind of like, he knows it, he's been there, he's seen it, he's done it, he's telling them you're out your depth, you don't know what you're dealing with, blah, blah, blah. But even still, he's got ego and a wee bit of arrogance to think, well, you don't know what you're doing, but I do, and I can take this thing on. So that was an interesting parallel. And you've also, funnily enough, in this film, you've really got two people like that, because Jeff Goldblum is essentially the same. You know, like, he's a kind of chaos theory mathematician, isn't it? You know, he's telling them, like, you don't know what you're dealing with. This nature will find a way. But he just seems like, again, very learned. Maybe doesn't have the experience of actually seeing the dinosaurs and dealing with them and stuff like that. But he's that kind of dissenting voice that's sort of very much against it. Best performance? Everybody would maybe suggest Sam Neill because he's kind of the lead, but as we talked about last night, I prefer Laura Dern in it. I think because her character goes so much against type, you know, like, it's a very strong female character. She's like a co-lead in this, essentially, for me. Like, it's not really Sam Neill's film. So Sam Neill as a character does have more of an arc where he kind of develops from this, you know, like, I don't like kids, to sort of loving kids at the end and kind of all those things. So Laura Dern just kind of goes with the flow throughout the film, and there's not, you wouldn't say there's much of a character development arc there, but what she does is she's just a very well-rounded and strong character that's is able to go with the flow with everything that happens. So she's a scientist, he's a scientist, they never sort of bicker over things, they sort of bow to each other's wisdom, you know, like, she's got her field, he's got her his field, and he's never like telling her what to do, he doesn't have to save her every 2 seconds, you know, she actually does a lot of that stuff herself. So yeah, I think she was brilliant. She really went against character, the sort of type that you had before.
At the
time,
the
like
trope at the time would have been the sort of damsel in distress. Damsel
in distress, and the especially, you know, leggy blonde and stuff like that. Or she's not going to be able to fend for herself. But yeah, I think it's between her and Richard Attenborough, who I think is amazing in it. I think he's just got, his delivery is fantastic. He brings so much dramatic weight.
Yes, definitely.
To the role.
Yeah, like the moment in the bunker where he turns to Muldoon and asks him to go and get his grandchildren. That, I feel the weight of that, and I feel the weight of how he felt at that moment.
He's an amazing actor. He's one of Britain's great actors, and like I said, his delivery's fantastic, and he goes through a range of emotions. When they meet him at the beginning, you know, like, he's so enthusiastic and hyper, and just like almost like a kid in a sweetie shop, and, you know, wait till I show you what I've got, kind of thing, you know. And then he fights his own corner, and he's kind of incredulous as to why they're against this and everything. And then there's that, it's like a gradual descent into, is this a terrible idea? Is this a bad idea? Oh my God, you know, look at the sort of toll it's having on me, the people around me, and obviously my grandchildren, and to the ultimate realization that it's like, nah, this is a bad idea. I've made a mistake, and it's time to kind of rethink.
But in a film also, I think that's a really important message for people to see, that,
Yeah.
you know, even you can be so attached to an idea and a
Absolutely.
creation, but sometimes, you know, it's okay to come
Yeah.
to the realisation that you're wrong.
It's like that moment where, like, I've done a few reviews and written a few essays and things like that in my life, and you get this moment where you're creating something or writing something, and it's just a point where you have a thing that you really like. You like the way you've said it, or you like the way you've done it, and you just won't let go of it, and it's almost like you try to write everything around it, and you can only really sometimes move forward when you remove that thing, that obstacle. Just put your ego aside and say, right, okay, take that thing out and move forward. And I think this is one of these things that he goes through as a character, where he's got the blinkers on about this. It's like, this is the moment for me, this is the thing that people are going to notice, this is the thing that people are going to remember me for, maybe. So again, he is driven by ego to a degree, you know, because you can see that midway through the film where he's like, you know, he can't believe they won't go with his plan, his idea, and he wants it to happen for himself, you know, but it's driven by something else behind that as well. Yeah, I think, as I say, I think he's amazing in it. I think he's brilliant.
I remember as a child being totally blown away by Lex's character. So she's played by Ariana Richards. As I was saying, this was probably the first film that I saw that was scary, and it was definitely the first time that I saw a child terrified on film, and I think she did a really, really good job of portraying absolute terror, and that was something that really stuck with me as a child.
Yeah, she's great. But both the kids in this are absolutely adorable. So, you know, when you first meet them, they're desperate to hang around with,
Yeah.
with Sam Neill. I think actually Lex is sort of told to go in and sit with Sam Neill to kind of annoy him a little bit as well.
Yeah, because it'll be good for him.
Yeah, exactly. She's trying to get him used to the idea of having kids around, I think so. So worst performance. Again, we talked about this last night, and I don't believe there's a bad performance in the movie. I don't think there is at all. But there's one that sort of rubs it the wrong way a little bit, and it's just Jeff Goldblum is a bit of a creep in it. You know, he's a little bit too sleazy. I know that's his character. But he's just a little bit sleazy, you know, he's a very hands-on, you know, rubbing her hair and all these kind of things. Now again, I think she's smart enough to know that she knows what this guy's all about immediately. She's read him, like he's not exactly difficult to read, but I think she's just kind of like in awe of his intelligence and things that he can show her, and you know, those kind of things. So I think she genuinely just likes learning, because I think, as you said last night, the first thing she does is kind of like try and bring Sam Neill into the equation.
Yeah,
so it's almost
she's like,
you
are
know,
you getting this? Are you listening to this? That's what I would do if there was an absolute creep and I was like, oh, here's my boyfriend over here.
Exactly. So I mean, Goldblum is just all sex in this movie. Like, he's all about it. And again, like I said earlier, he's kind of like the classic foreboding voice, you know, telling everyone that it's all going to go wrong. But he does have a heroic moment, you know, where he puts himself in danger for the sake of the kids. And again, I think there's a line in there where he says he does have kids. He's had multiple marriages, and yeah, he puts himself in danger. And how he survives the actual hit from the T-Rex, I don't know. But but yeah, he survives it, and then he basically spends the last 45 minutes of the film lying down with his feet up, with his sort of shirt
kind of like
to the
a
waist.
porn star. And at one point it does look like Richard Attenborough's looking at his penis, but
It actually does. But yeah, he doesn't have a great arc in it, and his character is a little bit cookie cutter, like sleazebag kind of thing.
I think his kind of redemption moment comes maybe too early on.
Yeah, I think so. That could probably have been saved for later on, so you feel maybe differently about him. But yeah, he seems like he's kind of done by just about halfway through the film. So the last thing we're going to talk about today is what this film was maybe inspired by, and maybe some films that it inspired. Again, as we said earlier, Jurassic Park was a groundbreaking movie, so I think it falls more on the side of inspiration, because it inspired so many other films, because it was groundbreaking what it did at the time. It was also new. But I think there's also clear inspiration from maybe films like King Kong, Land That Time Forgot, the Godzilla movies, Clash of the Titans, like the kind of Ray Harryhausen type stuff, with dinosaurs in there. So, and Spielberg's like a known fan of all those things from the 30s and 40s and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it was definitely inspired a bit by that, but moving forward, it's maybe inspired so much more, you know, like from Game of Thrones to Lord of the Rings, basically anything with a big monster or beast in it, I think. The techniques that are being used now were all a lot of them were pioneered in Jurassic Park. But again, some of the practical stuff would have been stuff that had been used previously in other films.
Yeah, and even DTS, that kind of came about, or for Jurassic Park, I think.
Yeah, that's a good catch.
Yeah, so that's become quite a staple of films now, so that was quite an important development. And I think not just in film and television, Jurassic Park and the whole franchise itself has really reignited a love of dinosaurs in popular culture. And you know, education. Yeah. There's been museum exhibitions, there's been, you know, travelling animatronics, TV shows, walking with dinosaurs, all these kind of things. And I think that's kind of helped reinvigorate interest in STEM subjects as well. So I think it's one of these films that the sort of knock-on effects of
I mean, I think
huge.
Kids love dinosaurs, don't they? You know what I mean? So those are it's never going to go out of fashion. It's always going to be there, and it's always going to be reinvented, I think. Whether we'll see, like, Jurassic Park be just reinvented every maybe 15 years or something like that, and it just continues to be Jurassic Park, or whether a new franchise pops up with dinosaurs in it, you know. But I think, they're never going to go away, and people are always going to want to flock to those type of movies. But when they're done on this scale, with this sort of level of budget and the level of actor and director that they usually have attached to them, you know, like, it's basically a box office winner every single time.
Absolutely. And as long as everyone wears sensible footwear, I can get on board.
Unlike Bryce Dallas Howard in the
I need to run through this park in my high heels.
Yes. Fantastic.
Nope.
Don't know how she does it, but she does. Okay, so final point is, what score would you give Jurassic Park on a level of A to F? A for amazing, F for failure, maybe. And you can also use pluses and minuses if you want to embellish it a bit.
I'm going to give Jurassic Park an A minus.
A minus.
Oh, but I feel really bad now putting a minus on it. Can I just say A?
You can say A if you want.
Okay, it's an A.
Yeah. I would say A minus, simply because, again, as a blockbuster, as a spectacle, as a film with no lulls in it, considering how amazing the effects were at the time, there's goofs and gripes and things like that, so I wouldn't say it was like an A+, absolutely perfect, best ever film, you know, but it's most definitely an A-level film.
And, you know, the science isn't amazing, but I think also at that time there weren't a lot of scientific theories being put out in films and things, so actually I think this was probably one of the groundbreakers for that type of thing too.
All you can do in those situations is, again, because it's a blockbuster, you can't go too deep. Christopher Nolan's probably maybe the only director nowadays who would maybe go, like, has blockbusters but then really challenges you mentally, you know, as well as all the visuals and sound and everything. So, but in general, as long as you have something that the audience can follow along with and understand, they don't need, like, great depth. You know, they can go and search those things later if they want. But to keep the story ticking over, you genuinely want to have something that's understandable and you can move on from it.
Absolutely.
And most importantly, accept it and suspend your disbelief enough for the film to work.
Absolutely. Wholesome family fun.
Wholesome family fun.
With a little bit of gore.
Okay, so that about wraps it up for our very first podcast. This episode was, of course, about Jurassic Park. If you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening. We hope to be uploading new content weekly, so you can subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to them if you'd like to hear more of our chattage.
And don't forget, you can find us on YouTube and follow us on Twitter at Deckard's Unicorn.
So, until next time,
later dudes!